Hi everyone, welcome to the Eureka Remediation Tools webinar. This is part 1 for grades 6 through 9. I'm excited that you're here to join us today. Please use the chat as we go through if you have any questions. To warm up, please share in the chat box, have you used the Eureka Remediation Tools yet this year? Write yes or no. And if yes, share a success or a challenge. At this point, you can pause the webinar to discuss this question with your group and then restart to continue. Our objective for the next 2 webinars is to learn how the Louisiana Department of Education Eureka Remediation Tools can help you diagnose critical foundational skills and plan how and when to address unfinished learning. Part 1 today will be an overview of the tools, a practice analyzing the student work, and identifying remediation materials. Then we'll come back together for webinar 2 to select and adapt remediation materials, identify when the remediation will occur, both within your unit or module and within your school schedule, and do some Q&A as well. Here's our agenda. We'll start with our overview, and then we'll do 2 practice opportunities before we wrap up our time. The Eureka Remediation Tools are a new resource available from the Louisiana Department of Education. They're available for prioritized topics in grades 4 through 8 and Algebra 1. So that means that they do not exist for every module within Eureka, but they are available for prioritized topics. So the state has selected those topics that are relying on the most critical foundational skills, or that they've heard from teachers that they've struggled the most to provide remediation for students. Each tool includes 3 diagnostic questions for prior grade level standards that are foundational skills for new content. So as an example, if you're a 7th grade teacher, your diagnostic will include questions from any of the prior grade levels that relate to that module content. So that could be from 6th grade, 5th grade, it could even go down to 3rd or 4th based on the topics being covered. The tools point teachers to portions of prior grade level Eureka lessons that can be used to target the unfinished learning, and they're designed to be used within a core math class, intervention time, or a combination of the 2. At this point, let's please open up the Eureka Remediation Introduction. That document is loaded into the webinar platform, or you can find it on the Louisiana Believes website in the K-12 Math Planning Resources. There, under the section Eureka Remediation Tools, you'll find the introduction document. And when you open it up, you should be looking at a page that looks just like my screen. You can pause the webinar now to find that document. As you're looking at the document, you'll see that this lists all the diagnostic tools that will be created this year. So for instance, if we are looking at 6th, 7th, 8th grade and Algebra 1, since that's our group for the webinar today, the modules and topics listed are those that will have a diagnostic created this year, and a check mark means that that diagnostic tool is already completed and posted on the website for teachers to use. Those without a check mark will be coming and are coming on a rolling basis this fall. Here's a close-up of what's available for 6th, 7th, 8th, and Algebra 1. And this is a really handy resource. I'd recommend that teachers print out this document and keep it with them so that before you begin a new module, you can check to see whether that module and topics have a diagnostic and a remediation tool or not, and you can use that to incorporate into your planning. So you'll make sure to plan time to give the diagnostic to your students and use the flex days available to provide any needed remediation. Today we're going to practice with a grade 8 example altogether. So if you'll please open the grade 8 zip folder on the K-12 Math Planning Resources, or it's loaded into the webinar platform. And then you're going to open the Eureka Remediation tool for Module 1, Topic A. So if you're watching the recording, go ahead and pause the webinar now to open up grade 8, Module 1, Topic A. All right, the first thing we're going to do is read page 1, not the cover page, but page 1 of the PDF using the page numbers in the corner of the document. And it includes 3 sections: the overview, the diagnostic assessment, and the guidance for remediation. And so you're going to read that silently to yourself, and then we're going to have a short discussion about what we read just on this page. So pause the webinar to read through those 3 sections to yourself. Based on what you read in the overview, share with your group, how might this resource be helpful to you? And you can pause to have time to discuss and then restart to keep going with the webinar. So most likely your group shared things such as the diagnostic is already created for you. Lots of times as teachers, when we're getting ready to start the module, we needed to identify for ourselves the prior grade level content that was necessary for students to be successful in this grade level module. This Eureka Remediation tool has done that work for us. So it's prioritized the foundational standards and created the diagnostic questions. Thinking about this 8th grade example in particular, turn to the cover page of the Eureka Remediation tool, and reading about the focus standards and the topic overview in the Eureka curriculum for Module 1, Topic A of Grade 8. Read that to yourself and then write down in one sentence what skills and knowledge do students gain in this topic. You can pause that to do that activity now and then restart when you're ready. So you've read through the Grade 8 Module 1 Topic A cover page and created a 1-sentence summary. Here's the one that I made after reading through that content. So by the end of this topic, 8th grade students will be able to generate equivalent numerical expressions by applying properties of integer exponents, using positive and negative exponents and whole numbers and fractions. So that was the way I summed up what's happening in this topic. The next thing I want us to think about is thinking about what we learned on the cover page that the topic is about, and looking at these sample questions which come from this Eureka module. Share with each other or write down on a piece of paper what foundational skills do students need. So what are the prerequisites? What skills do students need that are coming from their 6th or 7th grade or even prior work that would set them up to be successful with this content? Pause the webinar to make your list. When I brainstormed, here's the list of foundational skills that I thought that students would need. So I felt like they needed to know how to evaluate expressions involving exponents. They need to know how to multiply whole numbers, fractions, and decimals. And it'd be helpful to have some vocabulary related to this content, such as the words exponent and base. Your list might include some other skills as well. These are just the ones I brainstormed based on the sample questions, that it seemed like this was the foundation. If students had these things, they would be set up to be successful with this new grade level content. At this point, we're going to look at the diagnostic that comes with the Eureka Remediation tool. I have a screenshot on the screen, and so you can see that this diagnostic is tagged to a 6th grade standard, 6EEA1, and there's 3 questions that go with the standard, and they progress in difficulty, going from 1, 2, to 3. Pause the webinar and solve the diagnostic problems as a student would, showing all your work on the paper. All right, you've solved the problems, and here is what your paper might look like. Here's the way that I did the math to solve as a student would for these 3 questions. Now we're going to do a short reflection to consider, does the diagnostic cover the critical foundational skills that we had identified, and is anything missing? So when I think about what we identified after reading the cover page, we thought about evaluating expressions involving exponents, multiplying whole numbers, fractions, and decimals. The diagnostic covers both of those skills. It doesn't explicitly cover vocabulary, so I'm going to make a note of that. And the purpose of doing this reflection is if there was something that you felt that the diagnostic did not cover and you really wanted to get some information on that skill for your students, you could add something here. Or you could make a note that that's something you want to make sure to continue to investigate as you begin the module with your students. Now we're going to practice scoring some student work. So in the webinar linked into the platform, there are 6 pieces of student work from students who took this diagnostic. And you're going to use either your work that you just did or the answer key, the solutions page on page 3 of the Eureka Remediation tool to grade each student's work. So just looking at each of their answers, marking each question correct or incorrect, pause the webinar to do that grading now and restart when you're ready. Now we're going to make a list of which students need remediation based on our grading. So we're going to make a list of any students that did not pass this part of the diagnostic. You may remember from page 1 of the Eureka Remediation tool that the diagnostic assessment, it gives us some criteria for passing. So the part I've highlighted in blue on the screen, if a student correctly answers 2 out of 3 problems, it can be assumed that he or she is ready to engage with the new content of the topic with little to no support. So as we're grading this work, that's the criteria that we're using. So go ahead and you're going to pause the webinar and you're going to make a list of any students that did not pass, so anyone that did not get 2 out of 3. Restart when you're ready. Here are the students that I discovered did not pass, students 1, 2, and 5. So check against what you got as well. These were the students that did not get 2 out of 3 questions correct. I also want to highlight something else that came from the page 1 of the tool. So the diagnostic assessment is designed so that teachers can determine an entry point to remedial instruction and or opportunities for unfinished learning. And the entry points will vary between students. So that means that although we have this group of 3 students that didn't pass, their entry point is going to be different. And here's an example of that. So another piece that's helpful for our grading, and this comes from the end of the diagnostic tool on the page marked remediation guidance, it also provides some additional information about what you're really looking for in the student work to see if a student's ready for grade level material or not. So in this case, the tool tells us that the most important look for is students' ability to create the expanded form of each expression. So when I consider that information, I do see that there are 2 different groups of students here. Student 2 versus students 1 and 5 have different entry points. And here's the example of the work on the screen to show what that means. So student 2 did not pass, but they were able to create the expanded form correctly. They just did not perform the fraction and decimal operations correctly. Contrasting that to students 1 and 5, those students did not correctly use expanded form. So they have a larger gap that's more conceptual about how to create the expanded form and what is really meant by the exponent. So if I'm thinking about these 2 groups of students and the work I might do with them, those are 2 different things. One is more operations-based and just helping that student learn fraction and decimal multiplication, and the other is related to the expanded form. We also want to call out something that you may have noticed on students 4 and 6. Although these students did pass, they did not correctly perform the decimal multiplication. So you can see the example here on the screen of their work. So they did pass the diagnostic. They got 2 out of 3 correct, but I'm going to make a note as a teacher that I do need to work with these students on decimal operations to ensure that they do have that skill because I know it's going to be important for grade level work later. The last 2 pieces of the tool that we're going to look at today, the solutions page is on page 3, which you may have used as you were grading the student work, and the remediation guidance is on page 4. So take a moment and read the remediation guidance to yourself. You can pause the webinar to do that and restart when you're ready. As you can see as you read, the remediation guidance, it will highlight the focus standard and it will include the text of that prior grade level standard. Then there's a brief description of why the standard is important for grade level work. And then they give a little description of each problem from the diagnostic assessment, sometimes giving common errors that you might see or suggestions for working with students that don't solve that problem correctly. And finally, the portion in blue highlights the targeted resource for remediation for these students. So it links to an Engaged New York, which is the same as the Eureka lessons. So that's ensuring that students are seeing strategies that they've seen before and it's aligned to what they're asked to do in this grade level. And they give you guidance about which part of the lesson to use. So in this example, we see it says to use the concept development portion and a sampling of problems focused on conceptual understanding. This is the process that we've been working through today, and we're going to finish on webinar 2. So in orange, we diagnosed. We gave those diagnostic questions to our students prior to starting this topic, and we determined the gaps that existed and whether they were for the whole class or for a small group of students. Then we worked to understand how the prerequisite or foundational standard relates to the new content, and how the gap can be addressed alongside the grade level material. That's the piece we're going to dig into next time. And next time as well, we'll talk about taking action, so looking specifically at these materials and when we might use them in our instruction.
This has been a presentation of the Louisiana Department of Education, copyright 2017, all rights reserved. For more information or to contact the Louisiana Department of Education on the web, go to www.louisianabelieves.com or call 1-877-453-2729.